Borderlands 4 has had a really rough week, and the game isn't even out yet. Despite this, the backlash that Randy Pitchford, the CEO of Gearbox, has gotten over his comments about if you're a real fan that you'll find a way to buy the game has been rightfully criticized and curb-stomped by everyone and then some. Randy was wrong, of course he is, he knows that, he shouldn't have said what he said. But now there's more fallout surrounding Borderlands 4 and even Grand Theft Auto 6. Both games, by the way, are under the same publishing giant Take-Two Interactive. And as you'll see from both Randy and his publishing bosses over at Take-Two, they're changing the narrative and trying to win back public trust again. But I do wonder if it's a little too late and if this begging for forgiveness is going to go the way that they want it to go. But before I get into those massive changes coming to those games that are a direct response to the shift in the marketplace and how people in general view games and what they want from them, industry types are still roasting Randy for his, moronic words. This comes from Games Radar and it's titled Baldur's Gate 3 dev calls Randy Pitchford's $80 Borderlands 4 comments gross because it implies that the first-person shooter is more important than making it day-to-day. Michael is the head of publishing at Larian Studios, and here's what he said via Twitter. Inflation exists, we give inflation bumps for example to employees, and price increases can make sense. But saying real fans will find a way is gross because it assumes that your game is more important during a cost of living crisis than, for example, making it day to day. And it's exactly this, right? This is why Randy's comments were being rightfully criticized and, torn apart. Because he proved that in that moment that he was completely out of touch with not only the players, but the general going-ons for the public. Look, it makes sense. Randy is a multi-millionaire. He's been at Gearbox since the Borderlands franchise began, and he likely has made tens of millions of dollars in salaries and bonuses off each game's major success. To confirm this, did you know that the Borderlands series overall has sold roughly 90 million copies as of right now? There isn't really concrete numbers for the first or maybe even third games, but the second game alone sold 22 million copies. That's Elden Ring levels of success. We're talking in the billions, guys. So Randy Pitchford, like all CEOs with successful products behind them, end up raking in the top percent when these games do insanely well. And of course, because of that, Randy is not exactly in touch with living costs or knowing what a housing crisis even feels like, because the guy's basic expenses are pretty much just pocket change to him, and his home or even his groceries are but a blip on his bank account for someone like him. He's privileged to like in such a way where he doesn't really need to want for really anything anymore. So of course his comments would come across as disgusting and out of touch, because they were. And Michael of Larian Studios is right that video games today are not just really competing with other video games anymore. They're now competing with everything that you need to survive these days. We're talking food, electricity, gas for your car, medical reasons. It just keeps going. We all have our own struggles. I get it. So of course, this wouldn't go over well at all. One user replied to Michael and said this about Randy's comments: it is quite gross of a statement, though I'm not going to pretend like a video game is in competition with my day-to-day expenses. Video games are definitely a luxury. Always have been. If someone is buying a game and can't pay rent, their priorities are not right. To which Michael would then reply, luxuries are in competition with day-to-day expenses, and it's really just this. Because when I was younger and had basically zero money myself, I had to get creative and scrounge up any money I could get or find to get the latest game that I wanted. I'd even resort to turning in other games I owned for credit at EB Games, or I guess GameStop as it's now called. I didn't do that as a kid because I wanted to, because times were tough, It was hard to make my mom or dad want to buy me a game those days. I can't imagine these days some kid convincing their parents, hey, buy me this $80 or maybe even $90 game at release, never mind the expansions, that costs even more. That's a lot of food that you could put on the table for that same price instead. Of course, Randy Pitchford, knowing that he messed up big time, decided to post his thoughts on all of this from a panel at PAX East. And it's a lengthy rant from him that shows what he thinks, and it's clear that Randy is scrambling to change the narrative to fix things, because he knows that if Gearbox can't fix this, they're screwed. But are they begging? Well, here, watch what Randy had to say, and then you tell me.
Randy, I got a tough one for you. I don't know the answer. Why is it always me that Alright. What would the game's price be? It's an interesting one. I don't know this. Really? Now? I'll tell you the truth. I don't know. And that is the truth. I'll hit it. I'll hit it straight.
straight on. And it's an interesting time, right? We've got on one level, we've got a competitive marketplace where people want to, where the people that make those choices want to sell as many units as possible, and they want to be careful about people that are price sensitive. So there's some folks that don't want to see prices go up, even the ones deciding what the prices are. There's other folks accepting the reality that game budgets are increasing, and there's tariffs for the retail packaging, and like, it's getting gnarly out there, you guys. Borderlands 4 has more than twice the development budget than Borderlands 3. More than twice. The truth is, I don't know what the price is going to be. I do know that we will be opening pre-orders soon, and definitely the price is set. I would think that Borderlands 4, here's the philosophy we have. Whatever the price is, we're entertainers. Yes, we want to get more resources so we can make better games. There's a reason why Borderlands 4 is so awesome. It's because you guys showed up and supported Borderlands 3. And we had the budget, so we could more than double the budget and feel confident in that. And that's awesome. When the revenue comes in, we can spend it to make bigger games and better games. As artists, we want everybody to have it. You know, we want to make it as easy as possible for everybody to enjoy what we're creating. So it's a weird thing.
Don't mess with the amazing Spider-Man!
We want people to buy it so we have the resources to make more. But we want everyone who buys and plays a Gearbox game to feel certain that they got the better end of the market. Whatever the price is, they got the best value. And that's the philosophy that we live by. And so we're going to have a price.
Born again!
And it might be the new price that like Nintendo and Microsoft have led with. It might be that we say that. It's going to be the people at the publishing house that decide that. And if it is cheaper, then maybe we'll sell you that mini map that you guys want, but we'll develop later. How bad do you want that? $10? I don't know. I'm just kidding. Or am I? I'm just kidding. Or am I? I'm just kidding. Or am I?
Better stop that vehicle!
We'll know soon. I think it's going to be fine, whatever it is. I think it's going to be amazing, whatever it is. Borderlands is and it's worth it. It's worth it.
As you just saw, Randy was clearly in the hot seat and felt uncomfortable, but this answer that he gave was better than the real man would hold for obvious reasons. However, there are still things to criticize and discuss. For one, he tries to use the massive budget of Borderlands 4 to justify the potential price hike. However, this still doesn't feel genuine, because in case you don't know, Borderlands 4's budget is somewhere in the $300 million mark or so. But it's not the player's fault that Gearbox and Take-Two have decided to inflate their budget so much. Of course, the idea there could be, well, it had to be this way because the game needs to compete with other big titles that are releasing their games that are also expensive. Call of Duty is a good example. They're both first-person shooters and so on, but it's still falling on deaf ears. As one user replied to Randy saying, "Our budget was too high, bro, we don't give an F." And I mean, yeah, they're right, it's not really their problem. If someone tried to justify to you the reason why the burger they're selling you needs to be $50 because of any reason that you don't care about, because at the end of their justification, whatever it is, that burger is still $50, and that's an insane price for what's being offered. So claiming because of their own free will for increasing the budget it's somehow the reason for a price increase is a no argument. Borderlands 3 did just fine and exceeded Gearbox's expectations anyways, and we know it had half the budget of 4 because Randy literally just admitted to that on stage, as you just saw. And we know that budgets don't exactly equal good products. I mean, Claire Obscure is definitely going to win Game of the Year this year, and it's been widely reported that Claire Obscure had a much smaller and
Don't mess with the amazing Spider-Man!
Yet despite its smaller budget and team, it was still a massive success, reviewed insanely well, and people clearly love that game. Budgets don't matter. It's like movies. Just because some slot costing $200 million doesn't suddenly make it better than a horror film that you made for like $2 million. Budgets and the size of your wallet doesn't make up for a lack of personality or talent pretty much. And again, the whole I don't know what the price will be, but then also insinuating that Borderlands 4 would be following the Microsoft Nintendo higher prices thing is just gaslighting at its finest. Because Randy knows the price. He even says in that clip that pre-orders for Borderlands 4 will be opening soon, and that only then they would know the price. Come on, guys, this has been decided way back already. Randy is just terrified now to hit that big red button and then have pre-orders go live. You ask me, the game is going to be $80 digitally and $90 physically in America. There's no way in hell that they're going to do that. They're going to use every sort of mental gymnastics to justify it. Well, the game is coming to Xbox, which is owned by Microsoft, so we're just complying with their prices now. Also, Borderlands 4 is coming to Nintendo Switch too. We don't want to undercut Nintendo's first-party titles there, and so naturally, this means we gotta be $80 or we'll look like dicks like Nintendo. It's just a bunch of greedy executives in a room that are pointing and shifting the blame to the other executive until you get dizzy spinning around and then forget why you were even mad in the first place. Another user would reply to Randy posting that video, and here's what they said. Yeah, tariffs and cost of physical packaging is a terrible excuse. 90% of games sold since like 2020 have been digital, which should mean costs have actually gone down. Also, it's not the consumer's fault you decided to have loaded budgets and hire people that you don't need to make this. Clear Obscure Expedition 33 exposed all of this in the industry. Game was made by 30 devs and had a reasonable budget. And not only was it great and gonna be Game of the Year, but it was only $50. None of this also changes the fact that you just told fans of the series they aren't real fans unless they find a way to afford buying this game no matter the cost. Harsh words, but hey, they're right. I've exposed to plenty already on this channel how game budgets and dev team sizes have been
Don't mess with the amazing Spider-Man!
Of course, the reason for the AAA bloat was due to COVID and the pandemic. Studios were freaking out at that time because there was this new normal meta that was game attraction. People were forced inside. They had nowhere to go, so they were kind of ripe targets for games to plug and buy. Some studios bulked up like crazy across the industry because, you know, everyone was working from home. So we saw tons of investments come up. Around this time in 2020 was the whole big DEI and ESG boom. For lack of a better word, investors were obsessed with investing in companies that push diversity and all that slop too. It didn't really work. We know that already. It led to a lot of games failing and studios just closing down. But as I've shown in so many other videos already, the big ask for those investments from economic, social, and governance, or ESG for short, was that studios have to hire people based on skin color and gender and not merit like they used to, which is how so many studios suddenly had a bunch of people being hired or put into leadership positions that were incompetent and incapable of running a studio properly. I remember talking to a inside of Ubisoft before, and then telling me how the people in charge of entire departments at Ubisoft, and I'm not kidding, were women that were usually couldn't even speak neither English nor French properly, and also spoke in heavy ethnic accents that pretty much made them impossible to understand for most people at Ubisoft. And how does that even happen? Well, ESG money, obviously. And this money was taken by a lot of Western studios. Wouldn't be surprised if Gearbox did take some too at some point as well. So while I'm sure that Gearbox is massive dev-wise, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's for the better. Oblivion was made by just over 100 people back in the day, yet Starfield was made by 500 people at Bethesda too. And you tell me which game is more universally loved and also sold better. We know the answer, but it proves the point regardless. Look, Randy is trying to justify the pricing all he wants, that the game needs to cost more because they decided to add 200 ESG developers. They didn't bank that investment. Whatever other reason he can muster up, the end result is still going to be the same. He showed his hand, he exposed himself, and now he's reaping the whirlwind. And he, alongside the rest of Gearbox, can beg all they want for forgiveness, context. None of this really makes what he said better. If they now announce that Borderlands 4 is at $80 officially, the internet is going to go Super Saiyan 2, maybe even 3, and the inevitable reality that every game now is going to be charging an insane amount of money for their games going forward. We already saw that these prices aren't working for most new games, but it's clear that the industry don't really care anymore. They think that they can get away with it. And look, guys, I push the Gamergate stuff myself. I rallied people to push back against companies when they were filling your games with nonsense and then some. Maybe they're going to reject react this new pricing meta too, because if not in the future, games might end up being 90 or I don't even know, maybe even $100 American eventually too. And that's like $130 or $140 Canadian at that point for a single game. You'd be out of your mind to think people would pay that. But it gets worse for Take-Two's public image, or maybe better depending on how you look at it. So I referenced how Take-Two, the publishing giant that runs Gearbox and Rockstar, that does Grand Theft Auto and Borderlands, have actually admitted defeat and shifted goalposts. So let's look into that info now. This comes from GameFile.com, it's their exclusive, and it's titled, Take-Two removes praise for its LGBTQ efforts from its annual report, scrubs diversity references. GameFile combed the latest annual reports from Take-Two and EA, finding numerous fine print changes, some serious, some not, some seemingly in reaction to Donald Trump. So, you're probably wondering, how does this affect
Expedition 33 is the best opening to a game I've ever played. Look, I booted up this game to kill 20 minutes before jumping back into oblivion, and now I'm 24 hours deep, emotionally wrecked, blasting the soundtrack in my car, and watching TikTok edits of characters I just met a few days ago. The wildest part, I don't even like JRPGs. Look, it's not that I'm trying. I've dabbled in Persona, Final Fantasy VII, Xenoblade, Chrono Trigger, all of them. Honestly, I love turn-based games. XCOM's my baby. I love Pokemon and Baldur's Gate. It's just that every time I try to get into a JRPG, it's either too slow to start or just has one too many animeisms for me. But Expedition 33 just gets it. And I'm pretty sure that I sold 2 million copies in a week. Oh my gosh. So today, let me show you what makes Expedition 33's opening so special. From the first cutscene to a little bit past the first act break. Because how Expedition 33 not only hooks you, but keeps you engaged, laughing, crying, and crying some more is unironically one of the best uses of the medium of video games ever. Yeah, that's right. We're going full glaze. So, what is Expedition 33? Well, it's the first game from Sandfall, a new studio started by 3 ex-Microsoft devs that basically said, hey, you guys want to make something good now? And left. But not before hiring the composer on SoundCloud. And now they've taken over every aspect of my life, and it's become one of the biggest debut launches of all time. Man, I wish French people were real so they could see this. Now, the game opens up with a few beautiful establishing shots of what I assume is the same city the Vampire ranges from. And it's here we meet our first 2 characters, just chucking rocks. Me, Gustave Pattinson, and Ginger Shark, but I guess you can call him man. Now, Expedition 33 storytelling right off the rib that doesn't tell you anything, but just shows you the world and expects you to listen for yourself. And as someone with no idea where this game's story was going into it, walking through a ruined city like this and trying to figure out what the fuck happened here was incredibly engaging. In this first conversation, we learned that Hachiro and Gustave are a makeshift family, that Gustave was useless but still shooting optimism. How tomorrow is some sort of expedition they should want people to join. Gustave is certainly not thinking things, but today is something that means it's his last time. So, what's going on?
On your tail!
Now, from here, the game tells us to find Mayel and go find Sophie. We learn that Mayel has superpowers. Holy shit!
There's still a chance to stop them!
This is real power! The reality is, a lot of turn-based games become very unengaging very quickly. And it's basically hitting the same button for 20 hours with maybe a change in strategy, or it's just RNG hell disguised as difficulty. But what Expedition 33 does beautifully is give you 2 buttons that ignores that system completely. Imagine Bowser's inside story, but with a second road twist. Every attack in this game demands QTEs, and you can negate any damage by simply dodging at the right time. And while that might sound too easy or too broken, it's actually one of the most engaging combat systems I've ever experienced. Because the attack timings for every enemy are different. Sometimes a guy will just run at you and try to smack you in the face on his first swing, and the other times he hits you with the razzle-dazzle. The game is first, no longer window of avoidance, and then when you start getting perfect dodges, then you know when to parry. But the problem with that is, I have moved on, and I refuse to believe a game could beat me. Alright, you big son of a bitch, watch this parry. Oh my god. This game has beaten me so many times. And it's giving you this little bitty taste that's basically saying, hey, guys, turn-based can be fun. There's more of that. You want more? That you can't help but keep playing. But coming back to the intro, after killing Karatom with our own, she urged us to go talk to Sophie and just enjoy the festival, man. Go have a good time. She's beautiful. You guys have chemistry, there's flowers everywhere, people are celebrating, and man, what a fun, interesting world. I can't wait to spend so much time with these characters.
There's still a chance to stop them.
Oh, we're about to watch go to 30.
The real magic happens
Wait,
when
what
we
the
work
fuck? Oh,
together.
that's the painters. Holy fuck. Quick, shoot her. Holy smokes.
You belong to me.
Oh my god.
Under my spell. What a pair we make. You brought this on yourself.
Kiss her. Kiss her.
Anyone going to help? Goodbye.
Oh my god. No. No.
You are
This is real
uninvited guests.
It would have been so easy for Activision 33 to start with a 30-second cutscene explaining, oh, hey, that's the paintress over there. Yeah, she showed up 67 years ago. Every year she lowers the number on that statue, and whoever's that age dies. But instead, they just let you sink into this world, sponge in all of the loss, all of the sorrow, and all of the beautiful human optimism in that struggle, and then break your heart. They make you feel like a person in this world. Half of the people fading away this cutscene are characters you just talked to, about their own experiences of the Gamage. This guy couldn't get his son to talk to him before he left. This woman was bitter with Sophie for not having kids. And these kids were just excited to be out at the festival dressing up as some monsters. It's already here. I genuinely thought the roses just meant that these were the people staying behind from the expedition. Like Gustav were the ones hanging out. When you get blindsided by hurt like this, you can't help but walk away from this prologue feeling like Gustav with not only that sense of loss, but that wonder of why this has to happen and the motivation to stop it. In most games, this would be the point where you immediately cut to the two action. But
I disappeared.
just happened. We go to the expedition prep night with people hotly celebrating the night before. Gustav, clearly still rattled by everything, gets to know some of his comrades on the expedition and really what expeditions are all about. It's here we learn our goal is to stop the paintress, that no one's ever came back from an expedition. How they've gotten smaller and smaller every year, and in hearing that, Mael is tagging along even though she's 16.
This is real firepower!
Paintress, which spoiler, most of them feel like it's a pretty fun time. Gustav maintains this optimism. He knows we can do this. He is the leader of Expedition 33. And as you saw at the cell after a crazy speech from Gustav's sister, which he totally ghost wrote, you can't help but share in that optimism. And with a crew like this, I feel like Aaron Smith on this boat right now, because my expedition push forward, my expeditioners scream out, my expeditioners rage. Why is everything so scary? What? Is that an old? Is that an old dude?
You're old. How did you survive the Gamage?
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Move! Fucking snapper!
Lucian, we gotta go. Gustav, move. Gustav, move. Gustav, move. Gustav, please, 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 please. No, 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 no.
The right heroes can make all the difference. You don't have to be a
This game
witch
is
to
really
find the
big.
magic
This
in
isn't
this
just
world.
shock
But
value
it
for
does
shock
help.
value's sake. The beach scene changes everything. It's not a surprise that the place you're landing is hostile to you because, well, no one's come back even if they've been younger. But what's crazy is, one, that's an old dude, which, how is that possible with the Gamage? And two, holy shit, he's strong. And three, as Gustav wakes up alone on a beach trying to piece together what happens, the game makes it very, very clear you're not the only expedition this happened to. There are simply too many
Chaos
guys. The
surrounds
reality that they've been sending
but I
people
would
into a
gladly
meat grinder
show
for
who's in
67
control.
years hits fast and hits hard.
We'll be
Look, it
coming
might
in
be because
30
I'm a guy
seconds.
with big
Stay
feelings,
strong.
but seeing Gustav go from this to this within 20 minutes not only hurts, but immediately made me more invested in this entire world. And it's really
know
at this
exactly how
moment,
you
at exactly an hour into the game, that 6 little words had me absolutely hooked.
We do that. We both die.
Oh my god, the
The battle starts in 5.
Now, as we enter
4,
Act 1 fresh
3,
off of a second
2,
emotional sucker punch,
1.
I need you to understand that what follows here,
You're not going anywhere.
something from a country that doesn't even exist, is one of the best uses of the video game medium ever made. Because the way Act 1 Expedition 33 weave story, gameplay, and presentation together. It's just impressive. It is genuinely a masterpiece. And I just want to take this moment now to say, I'm sorry we didn't help.
We will avenge you.
I'm sorry. Act 1 is where the game really opens. After a quick pep talk from Lune, we're immediately ambushed by this door monster thing. And as you're actively grieving from the process, just everything that just happened, you're learning new battle mechanics like, oh, I can really shoot in this game, and most enemies have weak points. Cool. And there's another counter that lets me ignore all that RNG bullshit. Fuck. Yes, and it's here as you explore the first area that it really feels like you're playing a Souls game more than anything else. Throughout every level, there are these flags of past expeditions that are exactly like bonfires that refill your flasks, let you level up, and when you rest, respawn the enemies and defeat it around. In every level is full of upgrades, new weapons, music, outfits, and my personal favorite, logs from past expeditions.
That's better.
Now our bodies have achieved the pinnacle.
Wait, it's their chat.
So much more agile than
Chats. These motherfuckers did their entire expedition. And that's really what Act 1 is about. It's giving you a breather and letting you and the crew just have some fun because you're in a new world and it's got some wind. And it's here at the end of the first area. Gustave and Lune have arrived to the rendezvous point. All they find is a note that says, hey guys, it's totally me, Mayel, and I just totally went over here. You guys should come over. It's definitely not a trap. I definitely wrote this. Ha ha ha. And Lune being
This is real firepower!
Father/brother's like, no, we're gonna go get it. And it's here the game really opens up. Welcome to the world. Basically, it's just areas, but what's cool about it is just how much armed and dangerous. Or you can have left from the
Supernova!
we can totally just kick his ass. Yeah, on top of that, secrets inside of each of the different levels. This world map is just full of secret victory. Like, I don't know, in only a hardcore course.
You're never alone.
Please stop. Oh, thank you.
I'm fucking done.
So after following that note's advice, and head towards Bikini Bottom on Crack, where, surprise, Mayel is alive, and she has a friend, and he's friendly. Oh, yeah, it's here we find out Mayel's just been kind of chilling in this house. She has another friend named Noko, who's this little paintbrush creature called a Gestra, which turns out there are friendly people here, and they're endearingly stupid. What the?
Better stop that vehicle! They hit a checkpoint. Now might be a good time to stop them.
And it's here that I realized this game was doing something really cool, and that it was keeping me distracted from the anvil that is just hanging over all of our heads. I know the story is going to get back to getting dark. It's going to break me. It's going to hurt me, and nothing good can happen here. But goddamn, is this game so funny? It makes you forget about it immediately. There's a moment where you go to the Jestrel's main village looking for a way to get across the ocean because, well, we kind of lost our boat. But this place is not only full of great names, but moments. We just get to see the characters themselves really cut loose and enjoy each other's company at the end of the mission. It's so cool.
A nice deep freeze.
Enemy ahead. Prepare to engage.
This game is literally having you trauma bond with these characters, and it's here after winning a gestural fighting tournament that we find another one of the survivors, CL. Marry me, marry me, marry me, marry me, marry me, marry me, marry me. And from here, the game only gets more whimsical and lighthearted. There are camp scenes of the characters bonding, with Gustave walking around cheering everybody up, using his optimism to inspire and encourage everyone around him. Lune is laughing, CL wants a piece, and in a beautiful motif, Mayel is picking up the same rock-throwing habit that Gustave showed at the beginning of the game. They bond over it, and they make a promise.
This is real firepower!
No, I promise you. Run.
Disappear!
We can't simply see him.
Supernova!
Oh, I'm running as soon as I see a strand of right hand, trust me. You won't even see the other.
Together to
Now,
victory!
after the village, we get a hint of, oh, go talk to SK, he'll be able to help you, which all of the characters freak out about because SK is us to get him a rock from his
Second
best friend,
chance is
Francois,
over.
which might be my favorite character in the game.
You ready to steal? Oh my word! Humans! Well,
check this place out.
At this point here, you're having a great time. Morale is back. Everyone is smiling. And all you have to do is leave SK's nest and head to that cave and smooth sailing from here? Hell yes. And then Mayel has a nightmare. What the fuck? What? Why is it sitting too? What the fuck is going on?
Goodbye.
Dude, Kojira's gonna see this and shit.
A nice deep freeze.
Oh, this is so good.
Ah,
I am at your service.
No. Okay. You can leave, please.
It's her fault, and she
Now,
doesn't
a disappearing.
What?
I require shade.
My fault. Well, what's next? Double kill.
take your friends and go home. This is your birthday.
Cosmic might returns. Your fate is sealed.
What just happened? Look, I'm gonna make this quick because this has nothing to do with the overall thesis of this essay, but I just want to say this scene itself is actual fucking cinema. The way that whenever they cut to black and white for these dream sequences, they not only change the aspect ratio, but the focal
Only
length
60
of the
seconds
lens and the
left.
framing of the characters and the lighting to, work in black and white is something that I've never seen another game do. And obviously, very disturbing imagery. What the hell's going on here? Why is that guy that killed everyone watching us in our sleep? And who's the masked girl that looks a lot like Mayel? You can't help but immediately be filled with more and more questions. And the devastating part is that Mayel doesn't share any information with the group. And you suddenly remember, I'm watching a car crash in slow motion. You can't even see it.
This is real firepower!
Until eventually,
break the cage.
Disappear.
Even stronger already. Plasma!
enter the late player. Well, at this point, you have fought bosses.
Armed and dangerous! Again!
No, motherfucker. Now it's not like you're either gonna dodge or you're gonna be here for a very, very, very long time. I'm not afraid to admit this boss took me 7 attempts. Where most games with difficulty like this would probably be pissing me off at this point because most of the time it is just unfair bullshit. I think Expedition 33's combat works so well for me, not only because it just, segues off of that RNG bullshit, but makes it feel like you're actually fighting to survive, that at any moment, any misdodge or parry could spell the end for you. Much like the characters, you are fighting for your life at every second, not knowing which moment may be your last, so you have to make every second of an encounter count. And anyone familiar with a Souls game knows what this euphoric high feels like. All right, CL, come on, hit it with the whammy. Hit it with the whammy, baby. Hit it with the whammy. Oh, hey. Send her home, Luna. Send her home, Luna.
The right heroes could make all
And
the
the group
difference.
is overjoyed. SKA soars
don't
down
have
to
to
the
be a
water. Come on,
witch to
guys,
find the
let's go.
magic in
And
this
Moon and
world.
CL are
But it
quick to
does
join
help.
him, but just before heading out, seeing the paintress closer than ever on the horizon.
She doesn't seem that far now. Does she?
Yeah. Wanna throw one more rock?
Mayel wants to throw another rock with Gustav, and everything changes again. No!
I've made my share
so
of
much.
mistakes.
If you
And I am
hurt
fighting
Gustav,
every
take
day
Mail.
to make
Take
it
Mail, I don't care. If you hurt Gustav, I'm going to riot.
We'll be
Please,
coming
please,
in 30
please,
seconds.
please.
Stay strong.
Have a soul, please. No.
I can see the hate in your eyes,
It's more about
but I am not the enemy here.
that's what Maggie is. I ain't convinced.
Fair. My history with mutant kind hasn't exactly been perfect
The end of
in
this
any
act just
time.
ruins me. The old man attacks again.
The battle
Mayel is
starts in
stuck in a
5,
cage. It is
4,
just Gustav.
3,
And he's
2,
injured. He
1.
could leave. He should
going anywhere.
leave. The motto of the expedition, when one falls, we continue. You immediately remember the conversation he and Luna had.
We need to stop that vehicle in its tracks.
beautiful thing it can do and lets you be Gustav in this moment. You get to attack your man using any and every possible threat against him, but they do nothing. No matter what you try, nothing is damaging him. You feel more and more desperate, more helpless, and while the UI is on the screen, it's just throwing cutscenes at you. There is a meta of storytelling. And just as you charge up your ult, your most powerful move at this point, the actual clutch of most of your combat until this point, and it gets fight over, but it's Gustav extraordinary. It's all falls from his body. The old man just barely dazed. It's still straight.
Embrace the light.
Before it even happens. You already know. Gustav. Gustav.
I'll patch you up.
I underestimated you, Ileana.
There are a million things I can say about this game, and I don't think any of them would be enough to describe the feelings I felt the first time playing it.
Don't mess with the amazing Spider-Man!
Just to have balls to do this is just insane. This isn't something video game stories do. Let's just say, historically divisive. Looking back on it, there are so many signs that this was going to be dead. I mean, with a prologue like this, a gut punch like that, and what I think is most beautiful about Expedition 33 is its ability to make you feel this indescribable feeling because it got you that attached to this character. You see, the thing I discounted most about JRPGs is their ability to connect you with its characters, the amount of downtime you spend with them, the little quips to each other, the countless little cute moments of friendship, all of it piling up to a bond with a character I have never experienced. Games and media have an ability to not only tell stories that no other medium can, but get you to connect to characters and themes in a way that no other can. There is no book that can give me the feeling of Gustav's Last Stand. No movie that can make me feel this euphoric about taking down a threat. And while many have tried to adapt the stories of games to different media, including Expedition 33, which is getting a movie already, well said. Nothing can capture the magic of a story told in games effectively. In Claire's era, Expedition 33 may be the best one.
I won't make the same mistakes again. Now, a disappearing act.
Us against the world. We must stand with you.
Any of your activity, which is more than I can say for a lot of other companies on the internet these days. It also lets you access region-locked content from anywhere in the world, whether that's a documentary that's only available overseas, a site that's blocked on your network, or you're just trying to avoid price discrimination. NordVPN gives you freedom to browse without borders or restrictions. Whether you're sick of targeted ads, censorship, or you just want to take back control of your digital life, NordVPN gives you the tools to do it. Go to nordvpn.com/LDrops or click the link in the description or pinned comment below to get a major discount on a 2-year plan plus 4 extra months for free. And if you find out that it's not for you, well, there is a 30-day money-back guarantee. Thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring today's video. Indie games haven't just found success in recent years, they have dominated, not just as underdogs, but as some of the most beloved and talked about titles in the industry. And Indie has become a bit of a mess with the amazing Spider-Man. Or Sandfall Interactive with Expedition 33, well-funded, still operating outside of the grid of traditional publishers, and on the other end, you have solo developers like Tyler with Schedule 1 or Local Thunk, the creator of Follow-Throw. Completely different scales but the same result, self-run, self-funded, and most importantly, unrestricted by AAA. As tools become more accessible and these games keep hitting both critically and commercially, more creators are jumping in. And some are veterans that are finally breaking free to go make something they actually want to. Others are complete newcomers. But the point is, they're doing it, and they're doing it on their own, and that's where the friction starts. Because every new success story from the indie world exposes just how bloated and inefficient the traditional studio system has become. And for some people, that's a threat, especially if your whole job exists within a 500-person pipeline. These all-purpose developers are doing to AAA what YouTubers did to network television, what streamers did to cable news. They are proving that you don't need 10 departments and 1,000 employees to make something that people actually care about. And just like how content creators are often branded as unprofessional by legacy media, game developers are getting the same treatment from the AAA establishment. In an article written by Bryant Francis of GameDeveloper.com titled "The Professionalization of Video Games on Full Display in Action," felt like a warning.
Your powers are mine!
Solo devs and small teams are great, but it could lead to the death of either specialist. He writes, at DICE and GDC this year, I heard talk of a trend in game development that sent a chill down my spine. Deprofessionalization, as A16Z marketing partner Ryan Ritchie defines it, deprofessionalization is a phenomenon driven by the overperformance of older titles, particularly free-to-play live service games, large studios struggling to drive sales, and the outsized success of some solo developers and small teams. These three forces, he argues, will combine to drive career professionals from the traditional professionalized side of the games industry. Some of those people will decide to go indie, he continues. Others will leave gaming altogether, and in between, there is a vast spectrum of irregular working arrangements available. Yeah, I'm gonna have to stop you right there. The idea that indie success is driving career professionals out of the industry is such a warped take that it's almost impressive. Just ignore the last 5 years of layoffs, project cancellations, ruthless studio consolidation, and instead blame the one guy who made a viral hit in his bedroom. That's the villain now? Major studios have been pushing these people out long before indie would even come into this conversation. Specialized talent wasn't being nurtured, it was being discarded. Mid-development QA is being outsourced, and artists are being chewed up and spat out like they were nothing more than replaceable assets. But indie success didn't create this brain drain. It gave people a reason to leave willingly or a place to go if they didn't. So if those same professionals now look at indie devs and think, yeah, I'd rather take the risk and make something real, that's not deprofessionalization, that is liberation. Honestly, that's a good thing, and this industry needs more of it. Because the reality is the parts of this industry that this article feels are being threatened, corporate monoliths like Activision, EA, Ubisoft, Epic, are the same companies that are responsible for most of what's broken right now. Bloated budgets, monetization for design, copycat games that are designed to mimic Fortnite or Call of Duty. If those studios are shedding talent, maybe that's because they've become the worst place to put it. And if those same professionals that are being kicked out of the industry go on to build the next Larian, the next Supergiant, or the next Sandfall Entertainment, that's not a loss. That's the start of something better. The writer goes on to say, wandering through these booths, I found a mix of truly excellent and inspiring games, but also found myself stumbling with frustration. Few developers on display were working with teams larger than 3 people. They talked about publishers wanting ever more expensive offerings as a part of their pitch deck. Short-term contractors seem to be the best way to plug gaps. Feel like proper businesses were fighting to get their games in front of players and packs. Speaking with Rickney and other developers, I sense that deprofessionalization isn't just a catchy phrase to describe the demand side of economics in game industry hiring. It's a frustrating reality that may undervalue games from big and small teams alike. Rickney offers some extra nuance on his deprofessionalization theory in an email exchange we had before Pat. He predicted that marketing roles at studios would be the first on the chopping block, followed by roles that seem to be replaced with managers, even if they're not. I genuinely cannot believe that this article exists. The writer Walker Pack sees a wave of exciting and inspiring indie games made by teams of 3 or fewer and comes away frustrated. Why? Because there weren't enough proper businesses represented? What does this even mean? You just admitted that these indie teams are doing great work, but then you're upset because they're not expensive enough because the teams are so small? And then you go on to quote developers saying that publishers are demanding bigger budgets to take their pitches seriously. And somehow, that isn't the problem. You don't see the connection. The developers at PAX didn't create the system, the publishers did. This entire bloated mess is the amazing Spider-Man! That's with scale, overspending, and risk aversion. These indie devs are simply surviving despite it. But of course, now we arrive at the heart of the article, that scary word, deprofessionalization, is suddenly the tone shift. The accomplishments of these studios gets brushed aside. Their success becomes a problem, not a triumph. Because, oh no, they shipped a game that people actually like without a marketing team, or a Ludo narrative synergy specialist, or a lead experiential curator.
No. Wait.
Guys, I've said this before, and I'm going to keep saying it. One of the biggest issues in AAA development is bloat. Bloated teams, bloated budgets, bloated management structures where nobody knows what the person next to them actually even does. You end up with departments that are built to manage other departments, pipelines that are so tangled that you can't even see the final product, and a burn rate that is so high it is a miracle that anything gets shipped at all. And then they warn us, brace yourselves, marketing might be the first roll on the chopping block. Good. Most marketing departments in this industry are completely useless. It is never been easier to get your game in front of players if your game is actually good. You can't fake that kind of traction anymore. You can spend billions of dollars plastering Avowed on trains and buses, put an ad in Times Square, but it won't matter if the game doesn't deliver. Meanwhile, Expedition 33 has people screaming about the soundtrack, the story, the characters, the combat, because the game itself is worth talking about. You don't need a 30-person marketing team if your game hits. You need a game that deserves to. That shift is happening right now. That's what's going on. And it's not deprofessionalization, it's rebalancing. This industry has been top-heavy for too long, and that weight is finally starting to shift towards the people who actually build the damn thing. The article then pivots to acknowledge a different kind of success story, the creative renegades, the ones that are making weird, original, impossible to greenlight games that traditional publishers would have laughed out of the blue. Rigney praises them, calling them out as this is the only creative industry on the planet where one person can make $100 million making something by themselves, which, yes, is true, but the tone here still drips with comfort, like it's a cool fluke and not something to build around. Now, to the author's credit, they go on to clarify that small teams aren't obligated to hire anyone. They are doing what they can with what they have, and that includes the bigger context. Here's the frame that you start to see. Not that small teams are succeeding, but that too many people aren't a part of it. They then go back to Rigney and bring up a new example. Aaron Rutledge, former lead designer of League of Legends, Black Ops 4, and Apex Legends, now running a consultant firm called Area Denial, basically a hired gun. The writer admits that his career sounds romantic, but then calls this model a structure that celebrates the few over the many, one that elevates roles like design and programming while leaving out non-essential positions. What is this? How do you go from saying that this is the only creative industry on the planet where one person can make $100 million by themselves, to immediately following that with what feels wrong about this is how so few people seem to benefit from the status quo. Do you hear yourself? This is the benefit. That is the shift. We are no longer living in an era where you need to get a green light from a publisher, sit in a cubicle farm for 6 years, and then get your name buried in credits under 5 layers of management. We are witnessing one of the most democratizing eras in video game development history, and somehow your takeaway is, but not everybody gets to enjoy the ride? Of course they don't, but that's always been the case. But now the door is actually open. Look at Path of Exile and Grinding Gear Games, a tiny studio in New Zealand that grew to a 200-person powerhouse working on 2 full-scale games. It has 33 built by ex-Ubisoft developers with composers found on SoundCloud, and Jennifer Spencer again, a former private equity investor who just wrote what might be this year's Game of the Year. The indie boom is not excluding people. It is including people that AAA would have never hired in the first place. That old system kept the gates locked. This new era is tearing them down. What you're seeing isn't exclusion, it's a healing process, a long overdue correction of decades of bloat, overreach, and creative stagnation. I'm going to get some people that are going to disagree with me on this, and that's fine. I do not believe in supporting these bloated structures, systems, and bureaucracy more than anything else, all in the name of job preservation. I think that it is a pathetic narrative that is driven by people that resist progress. And in a lot of cases, because they don't want to adapt, they want to make it everybody else's problem. This is something that has happened since the dawn of history's integrated. Anytime there are changes in the market, anytime new technologies introduced, old jobs go out, new jobs come in, some jobs get displaced, and in some cases, like the video game industry, well, the industry gets decentralized. That's why we see a private equity investor starting to write for video games. Media's gone through the exact same thing, otherwise you wouldn't have a guy that worked 8 years in construction that has no journalistic background whatsoever that's writing reviews of video games and writing video essays on YouTube. I think the real problem for these people, and what really scares them, is that average, everyday people are getting involved in these industries, and in some cases getting rich because of it, and they don't like that. Freedom is scaling. On top of that, these people do not have the credentials that they want. They didn't go to college for it. Sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. Let's be honest, this article, especially coming from his point of view, is more about indie games are harder to predict, they're harder to market, and for them specifically, it is much more difficult for them to monetize from the outside. Now for everybody else, it definitely is. No more guaranteed free cycles, no more demos behind closed doors, no more getting cozy with the VR team. No, you're on even footing with guys like me, and I bet that keeps you up at night. But this argument is going to shift now. Now instead they want to talk about who does not benefit from going in, because indie developers do not hire these specialists that only do it feels like this is the only industry where doing more than one thing is a threat instead of just doing your job. The writer then goes on to say, my tax trick validated my fear that free professionals are especially vulnerable in this deprofessionalized world. Artists, writers, and those working in games, audio, or music. These roles seemed vulnerable because on these small teams, they were roles that developers mentioned doing in some sort of shared or joint fashion. All three risk compartmentalization as asset creators, their work treated as products you can purchase off of a store shelf. The writer then expands on this fear by pointing to broader industry shifts. He argues that in-house art positions are disappearing as studios are increasingly outsourcing asset creation overseas. This movie suggests is being reinforced by the use of AI-generated art, something he openly criticizes for its poor quality, but sees it gaining momentum anyway. In his view, the value of artists is being eroded not because their work is bad, but because it's now seen as something that can be cheaply replicated or bought off of the shelf. Even art directors, he noted, are surviving not on creative output, but on their ability to delegate. When it comes to narrative, the critique gets a little bit more personal. The writer cites industry layoffs, pointing out that writers made up the highest percentage of reported job losses last year. He attributes this to two divergent trends: the success of games that minimize storytelling altogether, and the increase in tendency for story-driven titles to be written by a select few, usually the creative director or maybe one or two collaborators, leaving fewer roles to dedicated narrative. He also then reflects on the long-standing frustrations that writers face in game development. Many have been brought in late, treated as an afterthought, or positioned in conflict with the broader design goals. Some studios have tried to bridge this gap by rebranding writers as narrative designers, combining them with implementation, but the implication, he argues, is clear. Being just a writer is no longer enough. As for music and sound design, his concerns are much more structural. Audio work, he says, is increasingly handled through asset libraries, with implementation often falling on the other team members. While some composers prefer the freedom to work across multiple projects, he sees this shift as another sign that audio professionals, like artists and writers, are being treated more like support staff than essential contributors. And there it is, the famous self-insert, the emotional reveal, and honestly probably the real source of this article's frustration. It's kind of hilarious that you still can't see the correlation to all teams prioritizing design and programming, and those are the games that are succeeding. I hate to be the one to say it, but artistic roles are less important. If it doesn't play well, it doesn't matter. Your powers are mine!
By the eye of Agamotto!
AAA, gameplay and performance first, everything else after. That's what players care about. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys that there's no value in talented artists, musicians, and writers. Hell, they're some of the most celebrated people in the industry. There absolutely is value in them, but let's be real, those roles only exist because of programmers and designers. Without their core systems and mechanics, you're not making a game, you're making a slideshow with music. These creative roles, no matter how skilled, are built on top of a foundation. They're contributors, not cornerstones. And those roles can only thrive if a studio is stable enough, profitable enough, and able to actually invest in things that aren't essential to core gameplay. What's wild to me is the complete lack of accountability here. This article paints it like it's some sort of injustice. Small indie teams often share roles, where creative directors also write, animate, and score the game, where people that are rigging the characters are also building the gameplay systems that they move through. But that's not dysfunction, that's adaptability. That's what a generalist is. That's how most industries work outside of gaming. Hell, I would bet almost everybody that is watching this video right now does way more than their job title suggests. When I worked in construction, I was constantly operating outside of my role, handling HR things like hiring and firing, writing environmental reports, coordinating with government agencies, researching equipment, contacting suppliers, creating and fulfilling purchase orders, even learning to read P&IDs and mechanical drawings.
I've watched
I got more involved in the
entire
process because
realities
that's what my
consumed
job
by chaos.
required.
I
That's
won't
what being
let that
useful
happen
meant.
again.
Wearing multiple hats isn't a threat to job security, it's a privilege, it's a
30 seconds before
responsibility,
you
and in
attack.
most
Get
industries,
ready.
it's expected. Look at Ubisoft, they are bloated with specialists right now, yet they are completely directionless. The first Assassin's Creed trilogy is made with around 150 developers. Now they have over 1,000 people working on a single entry, and every release gets further away from what made that series special. Gilliam Broche, Sandfall CEO, is also the creative director of Expedition 33. When that team started with just 8 people, they all had to become generalists, taking on roles that they had never done before just to make it work, and in some cases, they ended up excelling at things that they had never tried. And you know what? That made the game better. It made it cohesive, because when people are designing systems that are also touching the visuals, the animation, the design, you start to get alignment, you get purpose. You don't get this Frankenstein project where nobody knows what somebody else is building or how this whole thing fits together. That's the real problem with over-specialization. It turns game development into a game of telephone. The longer the pipeline, the more distorted the message. What the designer envisioned at the very beginning gets twisted entirely from the animators, and further when it gets to VFX, and it's lost entirely by the time marketing gets involved. The more segments the whole, the more disjointed the writer doesn't want to hear is that this industry was never meant to fully support. Maybe it's time for more people to take on more roles, because the industry got into this mess that they're in right now precisely because they put too much weight on how things feel and not how they play. We've got studios that are dropping hundreds of millions of dollars on graphics and cinematics, but they can't even be bothered to optimize their games to run above 30 FPS. We've got devs spending money on hair physics while the combat feels like it was designed by an intern. What does the animation budget matter if the story's a joke? What does a beautiful world mean if the systems inside of it are broken? Maybe people need to stop saying these things in a specialized role and take a step back and ask how they are actually using what matters most, whether these games are fun or not. So no, I do not buy into this narrative of deprofessionalization, not for a second. What we are seeing isn't the decay of the games industry, it is its next evolution in game development. Honestly, it's not even new. This is what the industry was born from. Small teams sell somebody that only knows how to do one job, or is it someone who understands the entire process and can bring something to life from start to finish? Because I know which one I admire. This whole conversation feels less like a warning and more like job preservation for the sake of job preservation. And look, I get it. Transitions are hard. Watching your field change around you is hard. But we're not entitled to the status quo. The reality is, the industry is shifting. You have to shift. That's life. Dust yourself off, learn something new, expand your role, and if you believe that your skill set is so valuable that you can in more ways than one. Before every studio won its balloon with 20,000 employees, most of this work was contract. Leader, production writer, and when one game had ended, well, those people then moved on. But over time, these companies got greedy. They scaled up their output. They held on to these massive headcounts, and instead of letting people go when one project ended, they slid them on to production for the next project. Your powers are mine! That is your leadership's fault. Indie is not a threat, it's the path forward. It's the path out. Unless you genuinely believe that your entire career hinges on someone else giving you a cubicle and a title, there is an opportunity for you. People are buying, they are selling, and they're not just passion projects anymore. Many of them are growing into sustainable, expanding studios with the resources to be able to hire new specialists when they scale. That's the natural cycle. That's how a new forest grows, not from keeping dead trees standing, but from planting new ones and giving them the space to rise. So if you're standing around waiting for AAA to save your job, I have bad news. They're not going to. But someone else might. Or hell, you might. You know, it's actually funny. The last time that I read an article from GameDeveloper.com, they had written an article that was called "Yelling is Not Journalism" by Brendan Shepard.
Pick your hero.
And
or villain.
that article
I'm not
was
judging.
essentially saying that, you know,
You don't
the
have
whole
to be a
Baldur's
witch
Gate
to
3
find the
drama,
magic
when that
in
was
this
going
world.
on, was an
But it does
opportunity to
help.
tell players why they get unfinished games, and basically why we should be okay with it, and we need to be empathetic, and we need to buy microtransactions and DLCs, and how it's not the developer's fault. But the funny thing is, we're customers. We don't have to be empathetic. And this entire thing, yet again, reads like a cry for empathy. But empathy doesn't make better video games, and better video games need to be made for these companies to be able to make the money, to be able to keep these specialists
Magneto
employed.
raised me to never stop
Jobs
fighting
follow
for
the
what
money.
I believe
So
is
regardless
right.
of how necessary you think your job is or how much it needs to be protected, at the end of the day, we are the
30
ones that
seconds before you
decide
attack.
what's
Get
necessary
ready.
and what's not. Inflation keeps going up, the cost of living continues to increase, and now these game companies want to increase prices on video games. Players cannot gamble on $70 or $80 games. And those are the kind of games these specialists are involved in.
my
Why do you guys
costume
think
just
that
kinda
Doom the
came
Dark
with my
Ages
powers.
isn't doing well in sales? It's because the game does not deliver on the value of the
Battle
price
starts in 5,
that is being charged for.
4, 3, 2, 1.
But they have to charge that price, otherwise
need to do is
they're not going to be able to make the money
capture the
back to be able to pay
Got
the
it?
specialists that they have working on the game.
Another magical
Industries and the world itself is constantly evolving, and you cannot believe that your job will be protected or that your job is somehow more valuable than others. I think that it is incredibly narcissistic for you to believe that the world needs to capitulate or protect you because you are only good at one thing or you only want to do one thing. You can do that, you can be that person, but if you're going to be that person, you have to live with the consequences of your lack of flexibility. If you do not bend, you break. And I think a lot of these folks are going to break. You are not going to get any pity from the average consumer. It's just not going to happen. Because we all know that if we say something like, that's not my job, that almost always leads to not having a job. And when it comes to writer, artist, or musician, these are things that in common society that we view as hobbies. And you guys have the opportunity. No, you guys have the privilege of making that your job. It is up to you to protect it, not the world. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did enjoy the video, make sure to share the video with your friends. Make sure to like the video, share the video. I should share. Subscribe to the channel. Comment down below. Or follow me on Twitch. Follow me on Twitter. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Stay cool. Stay
You're not going anywhere.
They're shooting from somewhere.
The industry has been nothing short of bitter for a very long time since the rise of players pushing back against their agenda-fueled nonsense over the past few years. It has led to what I can only describe as a revolution of sorts that has completely decimated the once ruling class of journalists and propagandists who benefited from their power. And for years, I've been fighting against this very thing. I turned my entire channel on the line at the height of YouTube censorship because I truly believe that free speech is more important than anything that these freakazoids think is imperative when it comes to how the industry and modern gaming is going. Gamergate, all of it was a tsunami that drowned dozens of these types in the miasma, and since then the actual remaining fully working game journalists have pretty much paled in size compared to just a year ago. And in this video I'll cover a group that is working to turn the industry against the players and what they call fascists, as well as how later on I'll talk on how they believe that even Valve and Steam is being ran by what they call problematic beliefs. So let's get into this. Don't harass these people, by the way, despite the fact they're not for you, the player, but this all comes from a channel called People Make Games. This channel is ran by a former Eurogamer writer named Chris Bratz. As seen here in 2018, Chris Bratz left Eurogamer and started a Patreon to create People Make Games, to talk about issues in the gaming industry that he felt passionate about. Here's the channel here, by the way, as you're also seeing on screen here. So People Make Games, or PMG for short, has a collection of videos all crowdfunded where Chris Bratz and others that he works with try to bring light to issues in the industry. Some of what they've done in the past is legit work, but at a certain point around 2020 onward, yeah, I know, the same time when ESG and DI became the de facto, we gotta push this no matter the cost for the entire industry, suddenly People Make Games, or PMG, became what I can only call a leftist gaming megaphone of a channel. They've become hellbent, as you'll see, on becoming more and more political as time goes on. Anyway, recently PMG would release a short clip recently on social media. This clip was to promote an event that they were attached to called Games Transform, and it's an event being held in London that exists for the simple reason to, and I'm not kidding, kick the fascists out of gaming. And by fascists, they mean people like myself, anyone who supports me, or anyone attached to Gamergate, and technically even any of you that are watching this that believe that free speech and the consumer's priorities should take precedent over new-based politics in gaming. I'll post a clip here of this Games Transform thing so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Here, watch.
Reform are on the rise, Trump has been crowned the God King of America, and across so much of the world, it feels like the far right have been able to very successfully position themselves as this necessary force of change for a broken system. And the system is broken, that bit's absolutely true, but the promises made by the likes of Farage or Maloney or Le Pen are just false. The great barrier between us and a better world isn't immigrants, it's inequality, it's hate-mongering, and increasingly, it's fascism. But what does that have to do with games? Well, you saw Gamergate happen, you've seen the vitriol that game developers still receive today if they dare to include stories that are deemed to include too much DEI politics. To put it simply, there is a part of games culture, our culture, that breeds toxicity and anger and resentment. We now live in this bizarro world in which Elon Musk, the billionaire backer of Trumpism, can be seen tweeting about Gamergate 2, or the inclusion of a black samurai in Assassin's Creed Shadows, or promising to fund and launch an AI-powered game studio to make games great again. We are losing ground here, and something needs to be done. That's why we're bringing back the Games Transform Festival this summer for the third time with a clear question to answer. How do we kick the fash out of gaming? This is going to be a two-day event held at Pelican House in London on the 11th and 12th of July. It's going to bring together game developers and players and political organisers and whoever else we can think to invite to puzzle over and answer this question. How can the left do something to stop and eventually push back this freak of extremism that's happening in our backyard? There'll be talks and panels, but also games to play and role-playing workshops designed to tease out lessons that we can then try and apply to this incredible hobby of ours. Tickets are now available online, and if you're watching this video on YouTube, you should find a link to that in the description below. The Fash are back, and now they know how to use Discord and stream on Twitch, and we should probably start thinking about ways to deal with that. I'm going to be at Games Transformed. If you can make it as well, I'll see you there. Tickets available at the link below.
As you just saw, this Games Transformed is being brought back in July this year, and its entire mission statement is, as you heard it, to kick the fascists out of gaming for good. I can't believe we're actually here right now talking about this, but it's very clear that the games journalists who Chris Pratt was one of, and now left to basically become yet another documentary-style group similar to NoClip, or even other groups like Kind of Funny sort of, or Second Wind, I guess, has decided to also go down the shoes. Shouldn't really surprise me considering, one, this Chris Pratt guy worked at Eurogamer, which, as we already know, is full of these activist types already. But what this event and having PMG spearheading this tells me is simply this: they do not want you nor I to have a voice in this industry or have any seats at the table either now or for the rest of time. They truly believe that anyone who doesn't parrot and agree with their belief system is a fascist far-right Yahtzee that must be excommunicated, blacklisted, and shamed into leaving the internet altogether. And the only way any of us are allowed to speak in these people's minds is if we all agree with them 100% of the time and parrot every single talking point that they do as well. So tell me exactly how this sort of push of wrong think versus right think is healthy for the industry exactly, especially right now. When the very talking points and belief systems that people like Chris Pratt and PMG are pushing are the exact reasons why things like Gamergate were created to combat against from the very beginning. It was always about ethics in games journalism, and when the people charged with being ethical could no longer be trusted to do their jobs anymore, it then led to what has happened in the industry. We're seeing plenty of games and developers pivoting and realizing that it was never the players who were trying to attack the studios, but in fact, it was the so-called ethical journalist types that were the real ball and chain in this scenario that were actually holding them down. I could use examples like Lords of the Fallen. Remember how Marek Kaminsky, the CEO of CI Games behind Lords, ran a poll about changing the body types in the character creator to male and female instead, and players, as you're seeing on screen, resoundingly voted yes to change body types to the only two genders. And it was a win. Lords of the Fallen changed that, and they kept to the word. They released their big update, and the game re-entered the top 10 global best-selling games on Steam almost 2 full years after it first released. It was a big celebration. People were happy. Finally, the game studios were listening to people on things. And yet the only people that had a problem with this change and such were, of course, the gaming journalist types. I did 2 videos on this Lords of the Fallen thing last month, and it got a lot of people talking and a lot of people mad on Twitter that I spoke about it in the first place. But when the journalists got angry, like this article from WCCF Tech, where they begrudgingly reported on how Merrick Taminsky proved the modern audience was actually fake and all that actually mattered was the audience that has always been here, you know, you and me, they ran plenty of other hate pieces against Lords and Merrick's developers, but ultimately their game came out stronger because of it and has flourished since. But you see, a change like what Lords of the Fallen did is bad in the eyes of, say, Chris Pratt and PMG, because in their opinion, giving players what they want is just grounds for supporting fascism, because the developers at CI and Hexworks made with Lords was, in their eyes of gaming parasites, a direct oppositional stance against their way of looking at things. They removed the body types, but to these people saying only 2 genders exist is of course now problematic. Even more recently, I'm currently playing Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon, and that game I can confirm from its character creator also that it has its body types completely removed, and when you make your character, it's just male or female and that's it. And I'm sure the usual types will be angry about this too when that game fully launches, but here's the thing, why is it bad to give players what they want? Isn't that what you want to do anyways? You're a company that makes games for commercial reasons. The literal entire point of you existing, besides making art of course, is making money and being employed to make more things in the future that hinges on how well your products do and how you connect with your fans. But if you were to listen to people make games and they're kicking the fascists out of gaming recordings, you should instead reject players' pleasing demands and continue giving more amorphous, genderless blob games in the future. Of course, since they released this video calling to arms against anyone who doesn't agree with them, like always, these usual types will fold immediately. As seen here, the game's transformed Twitter page has its tweets protected already, because of course they do. Then Savvy, here's her Twitter page as seen here, who like always is not someone you ever want against you because her detective skills are of a superhuman nature, decided to look into PMG, Chris Pratt, and more, and oh boy, let's get into what she found too. First of all, as we can see here, People Make Games makes almost $14,000 a month off their Patreon, even though they've only released 3 videos in the past 8 months. Damn, dude, I wish I got paid over $10K a month to not produce anything really at all. That's a little suspicious, don't you think? They were also nominated a few years ago at the Game Awards for Creator of the Year, as you're also seeing on screen as well. Further proving yet again that these awards aren't really based on how well the content is you make, but simply who you know pretty much in the industry. They've also made videos about how the game industry must respond to the Palestine versus Israel war, as seen here from a user named Ramblings of a Filipino Nerd, where they said, it's also the same sort of mindset that leads to demands that the gaming industry must stand for a political cause, in which simply not talking about politics is seen as enabling the enemy, in which silence is complicity. Irrespective of Israel-Palestine, no one is obligated. Yeah, the fact is that I don't think the gaming industry has any need to speak about an ongoing war, because last time I checked, game developers are not in the business of causing actual wars or supplying, ammunition to soldiers, but making virtual game worlds instead. Like that Filipino Nerd user said, I think people like this Chris Pratt of PMG is clearly someone who cannot, under any circumstances, really separate video games as an art form from their grifting-like over-politicization of how they view the world. Video games do not need to be overtly political. Sure, they can have political themes in them. I know Metal Gear Solid and Call of Duty do tackle these issues for sure, but I don't need Hideo Kojima to stare blankly into a camera or have Sam in Death Stranding say Israel versus Palestine, pick a side or else in Death Stranding 2. It just feels completely bizarre and weird to me, if you get what I mean. There's a tolerable amount of politics in games, but for these types, there can't be anything but politics in games for them. It has to be the focal point, the overarching conversation, and completely dwarf the art, graphics, or whatever else within these games. And if the games say conservatives are fascist devils, then it should be celebrated. Again, what annoys me about people like this is that they truly believe that their way of thinking should not only be accepted, but should also be the only way of thinking that is allowed. And that to believe anything else or question their integrity or motives just means that you too are a fascist, and this is why they're spearheading this event in London. And the goal of it is to bring together everyone who thinks the same and turn it pretty much into an echo chamber that will just end with those people just feeling even more validated in their opinions, and there's no room for discussion or bias allowed there. It's just you either think like them, or you will once you leave that event, because everyone around you will think and act the same way either way. Let's just say it's a brainwashing event more than really anything else, and the fact that what they deem as fascism is quite literally just players wanting developers and journalists to just respect them. Come on, guys, that's an insane overreaction, but sadly, none of it really surprises me, because that's what this always is. The fact that they've gone from everyone is welcome to games to actually anyone who disagrees with us or alt-right Yahtzees is a surefire way to ensure that people will just not support you in the future, besides the types who clearly already think like you. I wouldn't be surprised if people make games almost $14,000 a month. Patreon is largely supported by industry types too. I also wouldn't be surprised to find out that studios just give them money monthly to support them so they can continue to push their propaganda. After all, in one of their videos titled "What's It Like Working at Valve" is seen here, which yes, as you can see, I did watch the video to see what they thought about that. They basically have a whole segment where they call Gabe Newell, that Gabe Newell, to be a problem within that company itself. I should let the video that I'm speaking about from the very same Chris Pratt who wants to kick fascists out of gaming speak for itself. Hopefully this segment stays in the video and isn't copyright struck in the future, so if this segment doesn't exist if you're watching this later on, I apologize in advance, but here's the clip I wanted to show you, so please watch.
And so again, Valve is a different situation where it's completely physically, what exactly is his role in society?
Supernova!
And just like with the more recent DLM example, several employees have told me that ultimately it's Valve's leadership that makes the final call.
That was a decision that was, I wouldn't say unilaterally made by Gabe, but it's basically his libertarian political beliefs directing the flow of the company in a way that a number of the employees did not agree with. There were several more meetings over the next couple of months, and then word got around that a statement was being drafted.
This statement, published in 2018, is still up for you to read today with the title, "Who Gets to Be on the Steam Store?" If you scroll down just a smidge, here's your answer. We've decided that the right approach is to allow everything onto the Steam Store, and certain things that we decide are illegal is straight up trolling. That's interesting language, I think. What does straight up trolling really mean? Here's what I think about it. Valve wanted to oppose the extremely difficult.
And as you saw, PMG makes the claim that Steam is problematic because it is ran by Gabe Newell, who in their opinion has, and I quote, libertarian beliefs. I know not everyone watching is 100% political knowing themselves, so let me explain. In case you don't know, a libertarian is, as defined in the dictionary, an advocate or supporter of a political philosophy that advocates only minimal state intervention in the free market and the private lives of citizens, or a person who advocates civil liberty. However, in the case of how activists usually see people who are libertarians, they are often frowned and looked down upon because being a libertarian is basically just as problematic as being a Republican or even a conservative, because to be libertarian means you don't necessarily align 100% with either left or right political leanings. You kind of just exist in the middle where you agree with some of what each side thinks, but you don't necessarily feel validated or even represented by either fully, and that's why they're also described as being supporters of civil liberty. I personally think most normal people in the world are likely libertarian themselves without even knowing it, and they likely find problems with both sides of the political spectrum. But like the PMG thing with the whole Palestine-Israel war stance and how the game industry must choose a side and advocate for it, so too should Steam in the eyes of Chris Pratt and PMG, because Gabe Newell, as I've covered in other videos on my channel already, he does not want Steam nor Valve to get political or get caught in the culture war, which is the right way to go about these things, because you're a storefront and you will do yourselves no favors by pandering to either which side of any argument. It's just best to stay politically neutral when it comes to such a place like Steam. In that same video, Chris Pratt brings up how Valve allows games they deem offensive to exist, like one game they show where a black man shoots cops and runs away from them, but the point is that Valve is simply doing what they've always done, which is they just don't get involved. And while of course PMG hates games like that black guy shooting cop simulator game, as they call it racist in the video, the point remains that if Valve starts selectively banning games like this, it will just open up more avenues for activists like Chris and more to get what they want by strong-arming Valve and others. But generally speaking, PMG would likely be happy once Gabe Newell would leave Steam finally one day, because like I said in another video, the only thing really keeping Valve and Steam from pretty much becoming an activism-led political hellscape that censors or bans games based on ideological preferences is that same libertarian-like viewpoint that Gabe Newell has right now. And I worry that if one day when Gabe and his guys all leave or, pass away in eventually, that Steam can and could be controlled by literal insane people that have weaseled their way into the company with pretty much no one to stop them. And in PMG's eyes, that would be a good thing, because the thing we need to understand is that places like PMG and people like Chris here, and even publications like Eurogamer, Kotaku, and more, they have all in one way or another advocated for censorship via wanting to kick certain people out of the industry. I don't think their Games Transformed event will bore any tangible fruit of opportunity if you ask me. I think it's simply just going to be an echo chamber event. But like I showed you earlier in the video with their clip on the event as well, the point of that event is to create plans that will hopefully, in their eyes, end up removing people like me and others from the industry or platforms altogether because they all just deem us as fascists because we don't agree. But what would that world even look like? To them, it would be heaven. People like me suddenly died, or if Gabe Newell just left Steam. Because that's what these types are always like. It's not about combating belief systems or proving why their ways are superior. What it always comes down to is how can we remove people we don't like or agree with and then silence them into never speaking again in the future. The reality is that whatever PMG or this Chris Pratt tries to do, the ultimate end goal here is that their efforts are going to be pointless. Because what they're advocating for is a removal of what they call toxicity from the industry, not realizing that the toxicity was born and cultivated by their people and not the other way around. And making videos like they did attacking Gabe Newell and specifically calling him a libertarian as if that's bad is all by design, which is to label their enemies and ensure that through videos like that, hopefully the necessary measures can be taken to remove what they deem problematic at these companies and more. But my question is, how is a Steam devoid of free speech, or a YouTube or game industry even without that same free speech, a positive in really any way? In all aspects, that is simply the worst possible scenario for the industry going forward. But these activist types never see things this way. They would rather we all starve and die and everything be on fire than just allow people to have fun without their political jargon being stuffed down their throats 24/7. What it comes down to is this: people make games with PMG and their sort of ilk want one thing and one thing only, which is complete and absolute control over the narrative that form and shape the gaming industry. What they don't seem to realize, or maybe they do yet they just don't accept it, is that these people, these activists, have become so far left-leaning, they've entered what could only be truly labeled as alt-left going forward. They're as ravenous and vitriolic as the alt-right they claim is everywhere but on their own side. They are so left-leaning that even people who lean left are also a problem because they don't lean hard enough to their political side even. And at what point do these people realize that the loss of their power in culture is not because of some online boogeyman, but because what they've become is the exact monster they've tried for years to remove as well without even realizing it even. When you speak about how bad Elon Musk is, or Trump is, or how Gamergate is obviously evil, or whatever else, and when simultaneously calling for the removal of anyone who disagrees with you and to be uprooted from the root itself, you need to start questioning your own antics here. That you have truly become the very biased extremists yourselves, and that nobody, not the rights nor even the left, are enough to satiate your complete lack of self-awareness nor hatred for the rest of the world. You don't just suddenly lose control of the narrative like this and have to resort to basically re-education event camps such as the ones they're putting on if your ideas weren't anything less than insane. Some of these people are so unaware of how crazy they sound on the best of days to normal people and not realizing it was their own beliefs and tactics that led to ordinary people having to push back the way that they did might be the biggest self-own of them all, that they don't realize this. Which is prior to 2014 when the first Gamergate happened, the industry ran just fine. Sure, it may have a problem here or there, but the games are getting made, people were mostly happy, and everyone just kind of lived in harmony in terms of games. It wasn't until said ethics and journalism was questioned by ordinary people, which would be the proto-patient zero moment that led to what has happened today. Gamergate 2 wouldn't have begun had a Sweet Baby employee not tried to use their power in journalism and ethics to cleanse out something they didn't agree with. Even Chris Pratt spoke on Sweet Baby and all that in 2024 after his kid was born, and here's what he said via Twitter: "Dipping my toes back into work for the first time since Dylan was born, and oh my god, as if the historic number of layoffs hitting the games industry wasn't enough already, we're seeing women and people of color subjected to this hateful stuff again. It's difficult not to get hung up on the ridiculous, mind-numbing misinterpretation of the Sweet Baby Inc. story, but that's a trap I'd rather not fall into on Twitter. Notice how Chris Pratt doesn't mention how Gamergate 2 started at all. It's just the typical, we're the victims of all of this narrative, not bringing light to the fact that his side of this stupid war started not one, but two Gamergates in the past due to their actions alone and abusing that power that they had over readers and players, and the fact that to this day, they haven't apologized for that speaks volumes even. These people are not mentally well. They just want us silenced, and they're now instigating this warlike tactic of now holding actual physical events like Games Transformed to bring brainwash more people into thinking like them in the future. But what we need in this industry is actually just more common sense and far less of this hateful tribalism that both sides are at fault with. And the fact that PMG went as far as trying to paint Gabe Newell as problematic as seen here, which again in that video, they try to label him as a libertarian as that somehow a bad thing, is actually insane. Like I said, these people only agree with the insane reactionist activist types that lean so heavily to the left that you may as well just call them alt-left at this point. And when even the left-leaning people or the people in the middle like Gabe are now seen as problematic to you and your group, you have to start wondering that if this group of crazies thinks anyone, even those who agree with them 99% of the time, are the problem, how is any group of them exclusively the actual real problem in this industry? And maybe it's not the left-leaning sane people or the libertarians in the middle or even the conservatives that are really the problem, because clearly all of these people have existed for decades, working side by side at many of the game studios, making games you love for years already, and there's proof. Go look at any game made before 2014. Those were all made by people of all beliefs. But instead, this problem suddenly exists when these alt-left freaks come in and suddenly no one but them and them alone should have power. And if you don't agree that, then you're every phobic in the book, and you can't only not agree with them, but you are now labeled a fascist and must now be removed. It's insane to me that we are labeled the racist when it's these people who only see color and gender at any single given moment. Chris Pratt said in that thing I just shared here on screen again, where he talked about Gamergate, and he specifically outs people as women and people of color. Why not just say people, Chris? Why are you separating black and brown people from white people and Asian people like that? Why are you so ideologically screwed up and brainwashed that you clearly can't see people as anything but by segregating them into groups when you speak about them? If you wanted equality and collective acceptance, stop putting everyone in groups all the time. Stop labeling people with all these gender things that on principle differs them from others. Why are you types so collectively full of so much hate that you act like this all the time? I just want great games made by people who don't want me dead or jailed. Is that so much to ask for these days? And the fact when developers do give people what they want, like Lords of the Fallen, your types never celebrate this sort of stuff. Instead, it's just, oh, they bent the knee to right-wing alt-right Yazis instead. No, they just gave people of all creeds and beliefs what they wanted. They brought people together by their own actions. Why shouldn't you celebrate that instead? Where's a documentary on that one, PMG? Instead, you types attack these things and spew articles and events like this to just hate on them instead. It's not really gonna work, and I can't really speak for everyone but me, but I truly believe the whole industry would be a far more welcoming and better place if there simply wasn't this cabal of insane people trying to inject all their personal belief system and propaganda into anything they can get their hands on these days. Look, consultant types like Sweet Baby or places like PMG, ran by people who are backed by websites, are the actual true evil in this industry, alongside the greedy executives that are also monopolizing everything. Like, we have enough problems with the horse armor stuff and overpaid cosmetics that play in so many games today, but also having to deal with real-world, present-day communist morons who think that everyone they disagree with should just be censored or removed entirely from the internet is just as pressing an issue. And a reminder, just because Gamergate won like it did in 2024 doesn't mean that this is suddenly over. They're clearly mobilizing even further, and they're not afraid to pull even people like Gabe Newell of Steam and Valve into this political maelstrom as well to make a point. I hope this video informed you to understand that these events like these are nothing but propaganda designed to just indoctrinate vulnerable people into becoming radical, far less activists in the end. And while I know they will continue to scurry like the cockroaches they are when we shine a light on them, we must keep that light on always. Because gaming will heal until these types are laughed out of the room for being the propagandists that they truly are, and trying to hate Valve like they did, that's just a low blow, man. But what do you expect from these types? Thank you for watching. Subscribe, let me know what you think as always, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
You can count on me. I got a plan.
I've been noticing something when it comes to the online discourse of video game entertainment across the board. I've noticed how whenever
30 seconds before you attack. Get ready.
mold of how people think worthy of success, they suddenly want that game to fail. Every single video on Lords of the Fallen 2.0. I was doing great, especially for a game that is almost 2 years old at this point. Spoke about how the developers asked the fans what they wanted, and genuinely delivered exactly what the fans needed was both the current and the game they bought and paid for. They didn't have to fix it. They could have easily just left the game as it was and moved on to
All
the
you need to do
sequel
is
and
capture the
maybe
mission
implement
area.
those fixes
Got it?
into that eventual game.
secure
But they
the
didn't
area.
do that.
Raccoon.
They went back. They
We're
did the
gonna
work.
have a
They
problem.
swallowed their pride, and they gave people what they wanted. And the internet responded, "Nobody sold better than ever." it was amazing. If you ask me, more games should lead by its example. I noticed another thing, and it's sort of the point of this video, which is that
Recognition area is yours to capture now.
people got mad about that a lot. They got angry that something was doing well that they felt didn't deserve the praise that it was getting. It's not the only game. I remember when Western developers got butthurt about Elden Ring even existing, how Ubisoft developers and more were perplexed and saw a game that doesn't work its hands and let players do what they want with their not the forward worlds that Ubisoft usually creates.
Plasma!
You're welcome! 20 million copies in a debut year, and even won Game of the Year pretty much everywhere. We all know Elden Ring was a massive success. This because you get away with it. Everyone who played that game saw the magic. Their jaws gaped when they realized there was an entire underground world beneath the lands between. The game felt like an epic odyssey. Something we never thought possible was suddenly here. It existed, and it was real. As this article from when Elden Ring launched from Screen Rant says, Elden Ring broke convention and other developers aren't happy. As they say in their article, some of these game designers publicly expressed their dislike for how Elden Ring broke certain rules of game design, while simultaneously wondering why Elden Ring was so successful despite real firepower! I could keep developers who were salty about Elden Ring, but I really tell my step to know hey, sniper! Ubisoft and Guerrilla, that's Horizon Zero Dawn and Killzone developers, complaining about Elden Ring. One of these developers said, the boomerang arrow. You're welcome. Don't give me nor PC graphics, stability, and performance inherently finally armed and dog-geared! Developers got dogpiled by people 3 years ago for attacking Elden Ring. Dog-geared! And then players conveyed that how these developers and others responded to Elden Ring was showing its disconnect between what the players wanted versus what the developers thought were important. Since then, Ubisoft has become a dumpster fire that had to be saved by Tencent, who will inevitably own the company whole one day. They currently own a portion of it and dumped over $1 billion in investments into Ubisoft just to keep that bloated corpse alive long enough for now. Horizon Forbidden West sold less than Zero Dawn 2, yet people will tell you games just aren't doing well. Well, that actually isn't the case. Elden Ring, like Lords of the Fallen, are games that have become, for term, evergreen content. This means that they are products that can sell over time at a steady, healthy pace no matter how much time has passed. I'm not saying that this means that every day 100,000 people are buying Elden Ring, but surely every day that game and Lords of the Fallen are still reaching new players due to the developers, listening to the fans. Elden Ring, Lords of the Fallen has fallen, pun intended, in the same camp where the people who claim to be the positive beacons of hope in the gaming community always seem to turn heel, become very angry when a game does well that they don't seem to want to do well. Like I said, in a video on Words already, I posted it, and on Twitter, a lot of people really didn't like my video. They said I was chilling, and I didn't care for Words prior to this 2.0 thing, which isn't true. I bought the game day one, I beat it within its release window. Don't believe me? Go look at my PSN, it's sure you get away with it. You get away with it.
This is real firepower!
I felt like it was over my colors of whom I will not give so instead of giving I'll just consider them all one giant bloodless monolith, but I'll address instead which is simply they just, like the developers who were angry at Elden Ring, just like the constant attacks that CI Games and Hexworks went under following the release of not only Lords, but especially that 2.0 update, that they were bending the knee to woke drifters, when in reality, they were simply giving people who actually buy games what they wanted. That this was all a bad thing. It also reminds me of Baldur's Gate 3, which also, to a similar degree, was also met with insane levels of cope following its release, just like Elden Ring or this 2.0 Lord stuff too. When Baldur's Gate 3 released, the cope began to flow out of gaming journalists' websites